Welcome, everyone. Dr. Rob is here for the live Q&A. Dr. Rob, our first question is, I'm the betrayed partner and I'm struggling with how boundaries are being used by the betraying partner. I understand boundaries are essential for healing, but in what I have experienced, they feel weaponized, more like avoidance or control than protection. We've been separated for some time and my partner says he wants to reconnect. Can you speak to what healthy boundaries look like for a betraying partner, the nuance and context that must be considered after betrayal, and whether the same boundaries apply as they would in a relationship that hasn't experienced deception or loss of trust? Where is the fine line? Particularly when an addict sets boundaries such as refusing calls after a certain time or stepping away from difficult conversations to avoid dysregulation, which can feel at odds with what I hear in recovery spaces about betrayers needing to hold space, sit with their partner's emotions, and provide safety. And then it continues. Shouldn't boundaries come after full disclosure, sustained accountability, demonstrated recovery work over time, and empathy for the harmed partner without defensiveness? There's a lot here.
I know. This person
Yes.
writes well.
Yes.
Let me get this straight. Let me make sure I have the question correct before we start. My understanding is that this is a betrayed partner and they are looking
Correct.
and they're separated.
Correct.
And the addict, let's make it easier, the addict who's done the betraying has been setting boundaries about when they're meeting, what kind of communication they're going to have, those kinds of things. And the partner is saying, well, wait a minute, this feels like whenever he doesn't want to talk about something, he just calls it a boundary. Is that kind of what I read? Or
yeah, like
simply
they're asking about a fine line
weaponized
when it says it sets boundaries such as refusing calls after a certain time or stepping away from a difficult conversation to avoid dysregulation, which can feel at odds with what I hear in recovery spaces. I'm gonna like that was the part I keyed into. There's a lot of not
good stuff.
helpful. Well, no, there's a lot of not helpful things out in the recovery space.
Oh, right.
He should take anything, and I don't
Right.
care if you have to listen to it before. Honestly, like, I hear, and I don't mean to hijack this, Dr. Rob, but I hear like I tell both sides of the parties, like, yeah, not having phone calls, or not phone calls, like even conversations. If you're living in the same house, like, don't do this at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. And, I love, what I suggest is having a scheduled time, Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays at 7 p.m. We'll plan on 20 minutes, and then if we need to, journal about something or bring it back, and it's not 19 minutes for one person and 1 minute for the other. And it's common problem solving. We have a mutual, this is a situation, this is a whatever, we want to come to something. But I poop out at night. Like, if somebody tries to have a conversation with me after a certain time, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I like this to me, and the dysregulation, like that's a healthy boundary. Debbie McCrae, I call her the queen of healthy boundaries. What is it? What are you looking to have this person do? And is it, and I don't know, I'm asking questions. I've heard, where a partner he wants their addict partner to listen for 4 hours. That is not, like, no good will come of it. So it's like, what is the goal? If the goal is to create space so that we can work towards each other, then maybe it's not the addict partner's boundaries. Maybe it's like we have a mutual agreement of, so it isn't I'm going to use he and she. He's not answering the phone. It's like we just don't, we're going to set a time that's within the hours that we both know we can come prepared, that we've done our grounding work, that we're ready to have a conversation, and we're going to have a specific goal. It's not the rant or whatever. Now, if you're having an emotional, situation, you're triggered or whatever, you're living separately, it's harder, because it's like, not, you're going to, like, it's almost like you have to call in order to get them to engage, versus if I go journal and figure out, like, I'm really mad about this, well, what is really going on? And then could I have a conversation with him about that? That could be more useful. So I hear you, and it feels like, and I'm, again, I hear all of this, but I'm wondering if there's I want him to listen no matter what, and he doesn't get to have boundaries, because he needs to listen to me. but is your goal really, I want this relationship to heal. I want us to be able to move forward. I don't want to feel dysregulated. I don't, this is not good, because you guys can keep doing, the same thing, with unboundaried, like, we're going to, if I 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to call you, you have to answer the phone. And I've heard those things, well, what is the goal? I want you to be upset just like I'm upset. Does that help the relationship? I always like, what is the goal? And is it going to help the whole relationship heal, or is it going to just help me feel better in the moment? Guess what addicts do? I want to go feel better in the moment, so I'm going to go over here and go do whatever I'm going to do. And it's slowing that whole thing down and going, what really do I want? How do we move this relationship forward? And, so I know that was probably not what you wanted to hear, and I'm sorry, but I really want you guys to have, help and healing for this. And, having a conversation at, 10 o'clock at night and not sleeping the next, because everybody's upset, probably, doesn't help, either one of you, move the relationship forward. So,
Yeah, Tammy. I
I
didn't
know
mean
I'm
co-opt.
mean.
Yes,
Yeah.
you did, because it really was like, woo. So I wrote, and I write a note or two. I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes while you were talking. So there's
Okay.
so much to say. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad this question was asked, because
Yeah.
it's a complex one. And especially when a partner is angry and understandably wounded and hurt and feels violated, there is a sense of, they're just gonna have to sit there and take it. Because now they've hurt me and I'm going to hurt them, or now they've hurt me and they don't have any right. They don't have any right to walk away. They don't have any right to not tell me the thing. They have to tell me the things I'm asking. So there is a kind of, they're going to hate this word. Okay, guys, you got to forgive me. Entitlement that comes from being, I deserve, it's my turn. You've done this and I get to do. And that is the word when you focus entirely on you, and you, it is perfectly understandable. I don't want to take away from your feelings. I haven't known what's going on in my whole life with you. Now you've told me and I'm shocked and I want to know everything. And how come you don't want to tell me this? And and you don't want me to get angry? You're kidding me? Who wouldn't get angry at you? So there's all of that. Entitlement's not the right word, but I deserve, after what you've done to me, I deserve to be able to, and don't stop me and don't leave. And because I have a right after what you've done to ask these or do this. And so I can imagine for a partner, if I set a boundary about a time of day or a discussion, or that you might feel avoided, you might feel uncared for, you might feel or think, they just want to get out of this like they want to get out of everything. So I can understand the feelings of a spouse. I deserve to hear this. I haven't heard this. It's about time. You don't get to run away anymore. You've lied to me. I could go on, and I agree. But I really love what Tammy said. I'll say it differently. What is the best and highest goal for this situation? So I hear from the addicts all the time. And well, I do. I work with them all the time. But I wrote a couple of things down. So if you're angry with me and you escalate, you get more angry and ask questions. I know I do this. I ask questions faster and I have more questions. And I turn around and I start yelling at you because I can't handle that. Wouldn't you rather that I say, you know what, this is my limit, and I want to answer those questions, but right now I'm going to react and it's going to go bad. And so let me write them down. I'll come back to you. So I do think that about regulation, you want me regulated. You don't want me crying. I mean, you may want me crying, but I'm not going to be useful in this relationship. If I'm in, also, here's another example. I don't want to lie to you. I want to be honest. But sometimes when someone's going like this, I just don't know what, and this is addicts. We know how to lie really well. Telling the truth, we're not so good at. So facing that finger, which you deserve to, you did this to me, I'm more likely to try to avoid. So I think that the boundaries for him, he's not setting it to punish you or react. He's saying, this is what I can handle. And, mom would say, there's food I left on your plate. You should eat that. And if I'd be able to have a boundary that I would have said, but Mom, I'm full. So a couple of things I wrote down. I think there needs to be an agreement about, well, first of all, we did I always refer to this podcast on, it isn't collaborative. Oh, I got this wrong. Collaborative. It's collaborative separation.
Divorce. No,
yeah,
therapeutic separation or
right.
collaborative divorce.
So we did a podcast on therapeutic separation, and that was on sex, love, and addiction. I think there were 2 parts to it.
I'm going to go pull that for you too.
And what I loved about it was all they talked about was boundaries. And they said, I don't have enough. I'll give you an example. I don't have enough money. Well, I'm not going to give you any more. Considering the money you spend. And well, why would you want to argue about that? So, for example, you set a boundary beforehand. This is how you're going to deal with money, or you can't have the kids today after what you've done. Let's agree beforehand. So there are a number of things that you sit down and you talk about so that when they come up, you've already had an agreement. Or if worse comes to worse, you can go back and renegotiate that agreement. So I do think that in a very volatile situation, that structure is important because it can devolve very quickly into yelling and screaming and throwing and note and withdrawing. And so better to be calmer and respond in ways that you both can manage than to let things escalate and have one of you, be out of control in a way you don't want to be. They are pre-established, and it is okay to say, I really don't want to hear from you, Tammy. I don't want to talk to anyone after 9 o'clock at night. I love you, but I don't want to talk to you because I will not be prepared. I won't be. Yeah, I think that's perfectly appropriate. I'll get to the other part. They shouldn't be for an effect. So, you're doing this, so I'm just going to set a boundary. You're unhappy with me and you keep asking the same question. So here's my boundary. I don't want to hear it anymore. It's not in reaction. That's the pre-planned stuff. If I'm feeling really uncomfortable with something that we've already talked about, and you are asking this question over and over 4 times today, I'm going to say, you know what? I thank you for asking, but I set a boundary. 4 times is enough, whatever that is. So it's not for an effect. It's pre-established. There is a discussion about we will return to this or we will talk about this, but not right at this moment. It's not just to provide the person asking for the boundaries safety. It's also to provide you safety. Because if I will get to the point where I'll yell and scream or lie, that's not useful. And so I have to say, this is as much as I can handle. What else do I want to say? Is it okay for us to do that before disclosure? What I hear, Tammy, a little bit of that in there is you haven't disclosure, but you better tell me this. Or, I know we haven't disclosure, but how come you're telling me you can't say that? And I actually think there are reasons for that, and they are for you. Addicts are told, we are told not to say anything to you because you're at home. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you're about to go to work. Maybe you're going to go to sleep. And something occurs to you and you really want to know. Perfectly understandable. But what's that going to do to the day, the evening? And by the way, questions never come alone. The guys are kind of like, well, if I just answer this question, then it'll get better. And then it doesn't, because the question isn't really about the answer. The question is, if I ask this and I get the answer, I will feel better. And in the moment, it feels like you will feel better, but actually what's going to come up is another question and another question, because this is an endless, answers are not going to resolve the problem. Understanding will resolve the problem. Getting an answer to a particular question isn't. So, I do think we absolutely have a right to say, hey, you know what? I want to answer that, but let's wait for disclosure. And what I say to spouses is, for goodness sake, write them down. Write down every single question you have. I don't think now is the time to answer it, but I really, don't miss one when it's in the moment. Write it down, make sure. And sorry for taking so much time with this, time, but it's such an important one because I know that spouses feel, again, I am always spousal supportive, but I'm going to say this. What do you mean I don't have the right to talk to you when I feel like it after what you've done? What do you mean that you don't get to sit there and answer after? It's sort of after what you've done and considering how you've treated me and the fact that you've lied to me, all true. But what is the purpose of our working on each other if we end up fighting or lying or so? I had one more thing. I love this because I thought of it, of course. That doesn't mean you don't need the support. Mm-hmm. You need someone to say, you're right, he's a motherfucker, excuse my language, or, you have been through that and that is awful, or whatever it is. I think it is important that you need the support. It's just that I probably not the best person to give it to you. And this is, I think, hard for couples because even when everything's hidden, when I come home, who do I turn to? I turn to my spouse and I say, hey, this happened today. And Tammy turns to her husband and says, this is what happened today. And they are our best friends. They are the people we turn to when there are challenges. And now I can't turn to you. So there's frustration. Wait a minute. We used to be able to talk about these things. And now I want to turn to you, but then I don't feel safe. And but this. So I think it's really important. I know Tammy would agree, and I'll slow down, to make sure that you do have people who will support you and who will say that was crazy and say you deserve or whatever it is, because you need to be heard. It's just with all of this conflict and pain and confusion and the nightmare that you're living in, I don't know that you're going to get what you want. So I will say, I often don't do this, but I will say I'll speak on behalf of the addict, which is for him or her for them to be able to say, I'm not ready to talk about this right now, or if I don't want to talk about it when the kids are around, or I don't want to come home from work, whatever that boundary is, I think we do have a right to set it, but not in a reactive way. Reactive is, I don't want to hear about that tonight. You know, planned in advance is when we start disagreeing and their kids are in the next room, I want to say, we'll talk about it later. But the bottom line is you don't want to end up, the answer to your question is not going to resolve the issue. And if it escalates things on either side, then it's even worse. So what was I going to say? Oh, there's one more thing. We have this idea as therapists about content versus process. And so content is the thing I ask. Tammy, did you have a good day today? Or however I say it. It's the content of what I want to say. But, well, let me try it in a nicer way. Tammy, did you have a good day today? Well, that's the words. But what I'm really saying is, I care about you and I'm wondering if you're okay. So there's the words, how was your day? And then there's the feeling, the process. Whenever you come home, I ask you. There's the words and the process. So in this case, I think what the boundaries about is the process. How do we talk about these things? Where is it safe? What is the process? The content, I want the answer to, I want to talk about this, but the way you go through it has to have some kind of structure around it. So yeah, I do think, now I don't know what he's asking you, and I don't know what the specifics is, but from what you said, I do think it's okay to say, I can only handle this much. I do think, and as a matter of fact, I actually think that's progress for an addict. We'd rather pretend that everything's fine and then talk. So anyway, Tammy, I've said a lot, but no one asked this great question. So
well, I've got a couple of things to hang on to because you were like, and we'll talk about it later. I find that to be not definitive enough. So I like having, like we have scheduled times. Like I said, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 7:00. And it's I've been fed. I'm not too sleepy. I'm not whatever. And we'll talk about that at our next scheduled time. And I'm going to write myself a note, or I'm going to text the topic, whatever. So then it's like it's held. It isn't like I've got to hang on to this and it's going to fly around in my head. Like that's important. We're going to talk about it. And you talked about having others that say, the MF or whatever. And that's a little bit of a rub. No, but that's a little bit of a rub because I talked to lots of people, and one of them was sharing that all of my friends are saying you should get rid of him. He's he's a pervert. He's a whatever. So it's a little challenging. Like you want the right support, but having somebody that can sit with you and just go, gosh, how can I support you? That type of thing versus, yeah, you should get, because some partners feel like, now I got to defend them, or if I stay with them, and like it gets complicated. So be careful. Yes, have support. That's why we have so many support things. And then one more thing, Dr. Rob said, you do want understanding. No partner will ever understand an addict brain. We do because we are, and we get how we think. It's a little off. But if I get lots of partners who are going, if I just understand, if I, and that's the why. And we often say the why is interesting and deeper work, and some of that. Lots of people know the why and keep acting out. So the how do I move forward? What do I need to do today? Those are really helpful questions, and keep things focused on moving forward. Not that what happened gets, shoved under the rug. That's for formal therapeutic disclosure. That's for the process of working with your qualified professionals. A formal therapeutic disclosure is not a do-it-yourself job. Like that is, this is not something that you want to do on your own. Dr. Rob does a peer case consultation group with professionals every week. Guess what the most talked about topic, as a whole is formal therapeutic disclosure. So when the professionals who are trained to do this are talking about it, this is not something you want to do on your own. It's more traumatizing for partners. And I know every partner's brain is going, no, I need to know. No, I need to know. No, I need to know. And that constant dysregulation, it just, I say it's a deeper pit to dig out of. The more, because you're not supported, there's not containment, there's not, accountability. It's just makes it worse. And I often get people who have already passed that mark. So if you have, then let's get you the support so that you can move forward and not get stuck, which I hear often in those gory details. So that was a lot, but that was a great question and a lot of stuff. So anything else
Can I
to add
ask you one
before we
thing? I
move
want to do a
on?
little role.
Sure.
I want to do a role play with you. So,
Okay.
if you would be willing to, whatever way, maybe say it a couple of ways, say why. How could you? Why did you? All of that.
Why did you do this when I was here and I wanted to have a relationship, with me? What, this is part of the what, but what happened? Why weren't you thinking of me when you were acting out? Is that enough or you want more?
The answer is that I'm a really deeply troubled and broken person, and I'm screwed up in a whole bunch of ways, and it's hard for me to understand or even begin to understand the degree to which my crazy left you hurt and wounded. I'm still even trying to come to terms with that. But I am ill. I am troubled. My thinking is not clear. And I don't really understand it. All I know is that this is not the person I want to be. So what I'm doing with Tammy is I'm not, and we do with the clients too. Why did this happen? And why did I do? Yeah, I think it's important to know in therapy over time what happened to you. It does help you come to some peace. You didn't just, you're not born as a sociopath. You had things that happened to you. But the bottom line is, I want you to know that I get it. I am troubled. I am broken. I am foobar. None of this makes sense to me, no less you. So what I would acknowledge is I did it because I'm crazy. And I'll say it simply. I'm a crazy person and crazy people do crazy things. And I'm sorry my crazy bled all over you and ruined whatever, we had, whatever. Um, why I'm crazy, boy, I wish I knew all that myself. So what I say is a phrase I use with the clients, which is throw yourself on your sword. You don't have an answer. You can't make it look good. You just acknowledge and by the way, I think this is good for the addicts because if I say because I'm a really bad, awful person, well, I don't know how bad and awful people can really get well. Bad and awful people mean to cause harm. They mean to hurt people. As an addict, I would say I never meant to hurt you, but I am so broken. And I can say to the addicts, I can work with a broken person. So I think the one quick question for you is, I believe that this behavior was malicious, that this person meant to hurt me as opposed to my being collateral damage? What else did I write? Yeah, so I wrote, but the bottom line is, when these guys come into treatment and they do, and they say, I'm an awful person. I can't believe I did this. What's wrong with me? And they get through all this complicated, my mother, my dad. And I just say, your Tammy won't like that. Well, because you're really nuts. Okay. You're really screwed up. You're really a mess because that's why people come to a place where they have to give up their lives and go to treatment and put everything down. That's where we put the crazy people. And congratulations, you ruined your life and the life of those you love, and you not qualify for crazy. Let's teach you how to not be crazy. Not why you're crazy, but how to not be that way. So I don't even know if I answered the question, but I am just full of, what is it, vim and vigor, or whatever my grandmother was said.
That
I'm full
is,
of all
yeah,
that
yeah.
today.
Well, and the crazy, I mean, addiction of whatever form is a mental health disorder. So if you want to go to the little technical things, and to what Dr. Rob said, I thought I was crazy before I got treatment and help because you would not do the things that I did with the negative consequences that I had and repeat it over and over again
Mm.
if you weren't crazy. So it was such a relief for them to tell me, oh, you're an addict. And guess what? There's help for you if you're willing to do these things. And they were right. I believed them. I was willing. Dr. Rob talks about willingness a lot, and I was willing. I wanted to help. I wanted to change. And little by little, day by day, it happened. And yes, a lot of the why I learned. I've been in recovery for decades. And in the last 10 years, I had another big chunk of why. That doesn't mean that I wasn't in recovery and able to have a really good life all along. It was just another, oh, that's an interesting piece of the puzzle. It's
Mm-hmm.
all good. It's a journey. I don't have to know the why. And lots of people know the why and keep acting out. I repeat that. So, okay, let's move to the next one. Okay. I feel like there is a missing link in the process for women who don't give a crap about the loss of the relationship. Don't you feel like there needs to be recognition that some women stay for health insurance or just because they don't want to take out the garbage? The focus on relationship may actually be contributing to the codependent approach of the past. And I
Can you
did
tell me the
put
time? Oh, answer. Sorry. Go
I
ahead,
put
Tammy.
it in, I put that one in answered and then
Got
we'll
it.
move to open. But so I did put the moving on alone link to the drop-in group for women. And and I take out my own garbage or our garbage. I don't need a man to do that for me.
Good. I want to be with
So
you. You take out
yeah,
all the
yeah,
garbage.
yeah. I'm fine with taking all the garbage, you know. Anyway, but yeah, and we did a series on, should I stay or should I go? And lots of people, and Dr. Rob mentioned the therapeutic separation. There are lots of people that, live as roommates within the house. But then you don't need to have these long drawn out conversations because you don't, I mean, then it's like we're dividing up the household chores. We're going to have a plan for how we're going to cohabitate, but it takes the relationship out of it. We can go live our lives and all of that type of thing. We have lots of people, and again, the moving on alone drop-in group for women, it could be a good place to connect because those are people that are not focused on salvaging the relationship. And lots of people that come to our drop-in group, they don't stay in the relationship. They make those hard choices. So there's no like lots of people want to remain in the relationship, and lots of people understand that their addict partner isn't going to change and that isn't going to work for them for the long haul. And so they choose to leave the relationship. But everybody has to pick their own journey. So, but what are your thoughts, Dr. Rob?
Well, I've said this before. One of the reasons we set up 14 free groups, and that Tammy and I do this every Monday night for 5 years, is really do we want people to come to our program? Sure. Do we want people to learn about what we have to teach? Sure. But I do this mostly because many of you will never come to therapy. And those of you who get to come to therapy and really work on a relationship, you have to have the money, you have to have the resources, you have the commitment. So this idea that, we do focus a lot on healing. We do focus a lot on making the relationship work. We do focus on disclosure and working through things. But you're right. We don't say enough about people who don't have the resources to live apart, don't have the resources to separate. And what do you do in that set of circumstances? I'm going to look at that again. Where did it go?
Last in the
Um,
answered.
right. I keep going to answered. Sorry.
No, it was the last in the
No,
answered.
so you stay because you have to. Your kids need to be taken care of. You need the money to survive. You can't afford to separate. Um, I think this would become where my boundary would be, which is how can I come to peace with this situation? This is what it is. I don't want to work on it. I don't have to, I can be polite. I can be nice. We may or may not have talked about it, but I get my support from other people and I make sure my kids have a father, whatever that is. But I know that my heart is not there. And I'm unfortunately, and I think one of the hardest things in the world is separate your heart from your, to say, well, I'm going to be around a situation where there was love and now there isn't, and I'm still here and I have to look at that person. And, so Tammy, I want to directly answer the question, which what support is there out there for someone who has to stay, who doesn't have an option to not stay, who's really kind of like over the relationship, but they're not able to leave? How do you, because so many of the groups are about, do you think moving on alone or not? But even that's about an option. So,
No, it isn't. No, because it's for women who have been left. Some of them did not have that option.
ah,
There are women. We've had women who have their spouses have died, and then they found out,
ugh,
about so they were really left with a mess. So no, that moving on alone, have been left, have left, or have one foot out the door. But the focus is not on, but I think it's like how do you restructure the relationship and take out the, like we talked about, how do you live as a roommate in the same house where,
right.
okay, and some of them you just disappeared. Where'd you go?
I know I'm
Okay.
trying to get it so I
Oh,
can see myself. I don't see
and
them.
some of them can be, the roommates that eat dinner together and things like that. And some of them are, we're dividing the space, and you're going to live on this floor and I'm going to live on this floor, and your kitchen time is this. It really is the negotiating. And I do find that therapeutic separation workbook, they created workbooks, and I put the link in the chat, because that'll give you some questions to ask and things to think about, and then ideally you're still working with a qualified professional to help you figure that out. because the trick is now you were involved in this relationship romantically, you had a life together, and now, are you able to, is the agreement that you guys can date other people?
Right.
I mean, like, how do you, like, think everything through so
Hmm.
that you're not, caught up with, with certain things. And yeah, so how do you separate the finances? Who's going to pay what bill? How are you going to do this? It's, like a legal separation, it may be we need to legally separate our finances, or how do you navigate that space so that you're making sure each of you is taken care of and you have an understanding and you're both able to operate within that framework, so it isn't chaos and crisis within the household because now you're choosing to stay in this. We want to make it a safe place for you to live, without all the conflict, so, and it's challenging. And there are partners who stay, that both of them are on a recovery path, but they're just, they've lost interest. There are partners who stay with an active addict, and it's just like, 90% of this person, is fine, and I can live with that. This 10%, and how do you handle that? So,
By the way, I would say
okay.
if you could ask that question, putting all this aside, how
Hmm.
many couples are in a situation where they really don't want to be together, they're really unhappy with each other, and that's not an option? Because I think this is not unique to addiction. This is a question a lot of people have to face. So, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so, and somebody else put, we need more, we're underserved in that. So remember the therapeutic separation webinar, they have workbooks, and that would be a good starting place. So, okay, so go back to open now. What are your thoughts about the betrayed partners who ask questions in order to see how their addicts think to help their cognitive dissonance? We ask to see how sick they are, to see who they are. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but um, a number of years ago, my husband and daughter, I don't even remember what I said, and I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for decades by this point, and they looked at me and they said, "You think differently," both of them, because they both had that kind of quirk to their head. And I went, "Yes, I do." And I just said, "Yeah, I do think differently, and I've learned to, navigate through that." So, so I think they just learn to accept that my brain goes a little different direction. I know for sure that they
Yes,
do not.
I can agree with
Well,
that
I
one.
know, but I know for
Sorry.
sure that it would be traumatic if I was like, nobody wants to know all the thoughts I have in my head. I don't even, so I would want, like I would caution a partner of, like, how dysregulating is it for you? How much time are you spending trying to figure them out versus how much time are you spending taking care of you? And everybody gets to choose, but I'm like, seriously, I was decades in. I think I was like 20 years sober by that point, and they're like going, "You think differently." Yep. So it doesn't go away. I just have learned to, funnel it and think things through. More often than not, I'm thinking things through, getting input when I need it. So what are your thoughts?
I was going to say something. I'm just looking if there's something.
Top of the open.
No, no, I was looking at the groups that might be available for women who don't want to stay in relationships. So what I wrote down was why. Why do you want to know how sick this person is? You already know their behavior was troubled and sick. So if they're out of a 0 to 10, they're a 9. What does that mean if you find that out? If they're a 4, but they can grow to a 5, in other words, what is it in it for you that you get? Okay, if this is what it is, and I can prove it by the way they responded to this, then what is my question? What does that mean to you? And I'm not saying then what, it means something to you. I just don't know what it is. And if you're saying, and I hear this, I want to know how troubled they are to see if I'm going to stay or not. Um, to me, that's happens over time. How I am in this moment of time in my early recovery, I'm going to respond and react if I'm really working on it differently than I might have might a year from now. So it isn't a static thing, and it changes in different situations. Well, for example, a lot of the men I work with, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they have really stable jobs, they're doing great. So you could give them a 9 on the cognitive, on the ability to manage their life scale, and then in personal relationships, there are 2. So I think you have to look at the whole person and not just the situation. And I think you have to understand it's not static, there's movement. But the most important question that I have is, Why do you want to ask that question? What does it mean to you? And if you got the answer, then what? What would you do if you got answer X or answer B? What choice would you make? So really, for me, it's the underlying of why are you asking that question, and what do you think that will help you understand? We ask to see how sick they are, to see who they are. Well, that's interesting, by the way, too, because I'm not entirely one thing at all. And to me, the addicts want to say, well, my addiction's over there, and that's the sick part of me, but the rest of me is healthy or this or that. And I just say you're one person and the addict is one part of you. So as hurt and as angry and violated as I feel, I have to at some point realize this is a whole person. And what kind of relationship? Well, Tammy, we went through this recently. I don't want to say it, can't say it directly. How do I say this? Um, there was a spouse who was extremely, I really want to say this in a way that doesn't reveal anyone. Um, there was a couple that had a crisis come up. I'll give an example. One of their children passed away or was very, very sick. And everyone's saying, look what he did to you. He doesn't get to go to the hospital. Look what he did to you. He shouldn't spend time with you. And look what he did to you. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe there was cheating, there was lying, but some things are just rise above that. And when it comes to life or death, for example, I'm sorry, that may have happened, but as a couple, we've ridden through this, and as a couple, we need to go through that. So again, I don't know what your reasoning is and what you're thinking. To me, it's sort of like another one of those, why did you do this? What does it mean? Do you love me or not? It's another, how crazy are you? So I can know whether I'm going to stay with you or not. Well, by the way, you married this crazy person or you're with this crazy person, so you already know them pretty well. This part of them has been hidden from you, but there's a whole lot else there that you can be reminded of when in time when your anger and hurt goes by. But I don't think, and I really want to ask very directly, Tammy, do you think that there is an answer to that question that would be helpful? I really want to know. I realize that he just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, to me, it like, first of all, like, thoughts are not inner circle behaviors, like that would not be an acting out. And trying to go down and especially if you're looking at thoughts on past behavior, like, to me, that feels like I'm trying to figure out the past so I can predict the future, which, his actions, like, I'm all about what is he doing now and how are his actions different, so that you see that this person is moving forward in a different way, that has the support, the accountability, all of those things.
Mhm.
Our thoughts, it can get us into trouble. Again, why if I'm thinking I should reach out to somebody and verify this, I'm 100% sure now that what I want to do or what I'm thinking about is not useful. And I do. I mean, I use Debbie McCrae's stop it if I've got looping. I use all of the stuff that we talk about on this because I want to move forward in the most productive way. But I still don't know a partner who can, well, if he tells, I'm using he and she, if he tells me all of this, then I'm going to do my detective work, and then I'm going to know, and then I'm going to understand that. And then, like Dr. Rob said, then what? So you understand that one little piece, that's one little incident, but that is not a predictor of future behavior. Is he going to have that exact thought again, or some other situation? Like there's not the if this then that. It's like lots of people talk about, well, he was sexually abused as a child, so therefore he's a sex addict. No, there's a lot of people that were sexually abused as a child and aren't sex addicts. So it isn't because of this, then that. It's
Mhm.
too simplistic. That is why this is complex. That is why we recommend highly trained and skilled and qualified professionals, to do this work. It is not, going on Dr. Google and finding, stuff. There's a lot of junk out there, and so we work really hard to provide resources that will be meaningful, that can give you a lifeline, for moving forward. And yes, you get to pick. Everybody gets to pick. We have lots of people that do the exact opposite of what we have seen to be the most useful, and it's your life, like, zero judgment on that. It's your life, your path.
I wanted to
So
say something, and I
please.
sort of said this before. I can lie, I can cheat, I
Mhm.
can hurt you without a second thought. I can steal. I can steal your soul, steal because I'm an addict. And when I'm in that place, I don't really care about anyone, including myself. But I'm also generous. I'm kind. I am loving. I am incredibly supportive. I'll give you the shirt off my back. I make people laugh, I'm funny, and all those things are still true, despite the fact that I can be. So again, it's not that I'm in this moment, in your experience, I'm this lying SOB who did these things to you, and that must be, and I didn't know who they were, and now I know they were, but you know who we are. And in fact, I think you are the hope for us. If you stay as a partner, I must not be that bad, because maybe they see things in me that are meaningful and are important, that I can still care about myself for. So I know in a moment of anger, you just want to say, well, they're just a lying sack of whatever. But if you think back, and you can sit back and say, well, but they've also done this for people. And and that to me is how I look at it. If you really want to look at who this person really is, then you have to look at who they've been, and not just simply how you're feeling in that moment of betrayal and what they've done there. Um, I did have a little answer to a different question, which was, how could you do this to me? Why me? And is it that I'm not this enough? I'm not that enough?
Mm-hmm.
And most often the answer is, well, I was doing this long before I met you.
Mm-hmm.
And you think this is about you. Well, the immediate situation is about you, but I cheat on everyone I've ever met, or I lied,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very hard in the moment when it's so personal around sexuality and betrayal to say, how, what is it about me? What did you do? And I really want you to know, like, I had this problem, and all of us, we had these problems long before we met you. We may have not put a name on it. We may have just thought, oh, well, that's how my life is. I just do this. But I want to take some of the sting out of the thought that since we've been together, now the violation is I didn't tell you. The violation is I got deeply involved with you, and I didn't tell you how often I lied, cheated, and all of that stuff. And you married someone who you didn't even know who they were. That is a violation. But anyway, I said what I had to say. But I was challenging earlier, and I'm challenging now. And I challenged people when I was 14 and 7, maybe not in the same way. You know what my mother said? She said, all of your life, your mouth's going to get you in trouble. And you know what? She was right. I still say things that piss people off. But anyway, I'm going off and off and on and on. You go. Questions. You're smiling.
I was like, I had a similar comment made when I was there. There's
Okay.
a lot in common. Anyway, okay. So back to the first question. We had disclosure, so I'm not questioning the need for boundaries. I believe in both of us regulating and taking space when needed. What I'm struggling with is that when he sets a boundary by pausing the conversation, he doesn't come back to it. That's not like we talk all the time. Okay.
Answer the rest
If
of the
the
question.
boundary is meant to support regulation and repair, isn't it also meant to include that when and how the conversation will be revisited? Absolutely. Rather than ending it indefinitely. He claims I left because he started setting boundaries. That is, so now there's more to the story. So what we said, yes, if a timeout is called, every webinar we've talked about with calling a timeout, the person that calls the timeout, either there's a plan of like, we will come back to this, like if whoever calls the timeout, we're going to come back to it in an hour, or, whoever calls the timeout will say, we're going to come back to this, or again, we'll talk about this at our next scheduled time. So yeah, that is not the proper use of a boundary, so I can understand, but and maybe the conversation when you're not in the moment is, let's have a plan. So if you're calling a time out, I need to regulate, then I will be, because you're not living in the same home, I will be calling you at 10 a.m. Does that work for you? Okay. Whatever, or if you're going to talk about this with a couples therapist, let's schedule this one. It's bigger. And let's schedule this to talk with our couples therapist. So to me, what I'm reading is you're saying he's ducking out of things, and that's not okay. That is not a boundary. That is, I'm just sucking out of things. But guess what? You guys, like, addiction is lack of boundaries on every level. So nobody's going to get this right, right from the start. That's why we teach a class for partners about healthy boundaries. Like that helps us figure out what is and isn't going to be useful for our situation. So, yeah, thoughts on that, Dr. Rob? Hello.
I'm sorry. Someone just walked in the room and walked back out.
Okay.
So I actually really, really wanted to answer this question. There are a couple of
Please.
things. So Tammy said the word timeout. And this is something that we actually teach and work on. This is a therapeutic technique. And it doesn't have to be with you guys, with any couple that's in conflict. So here's how it works. When you are not upset with each other, when it is a good moment, or at least one where you're calm, you say, let's practice a timeout. And you sit in the kitchen and there's agreements. So here, let me do the agreements first. When I can't handle the conversation, I may say, I need a break. And that means I need a break. It also means I'm going to come back. So if I'm arguing with you and I feel like, you know what, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to say something I don't mean to say. I say, I'm going to take a time out. I'll be in the garage. I'll be taking a walk and I will be back at this time. So the spouse isn't sitting and saying, you know, well, wait a minute, when did they come back? Or did they just walk out? So you actually know that when something happens, they will take care of themselves, either one of you, and that you will be back. So the idea, it isn't just I'm walking out, I can't handle this, but I can't handle it in the moment. And by the way, when you come back together, if it's still really heated, then you say, you know what, maybe we need a timeout till the morning. So you don't give up the question, you don't give up the conversation. It's really the timing. Is when am I best able to give you what you're asking for? And it might be an hour from now. I also see it at the other end, and I'll get to the rest of the question, which is I have seen people I work with, addicts, say, you know what, I need 15 minutes, I'm just overwhelmed. And I've seen a spouse get in the doorway and say, you are not going to leave. And boy, is that that's a real situation for explosion. So spouses are going to have, you're going to have to tolerate in the moment that I may not be able to handle it, knowing that I'm going to come back, knowing that I will discuss it with you. Um, is there anything else? I wanted to answer the rest of it, but is there anything else about that part? The boundary
I love
setting?
that you talked about practicing, and because that's the piece that I think often is missed, of like, we need to practice this when we're not in the moment, and and like, again, it can be a set. I'm going to, oh, one other thing I really like is I need to step away. I need to go regulate. I am not abandoning you helps a lot, because then it's like,
Right.
I am not abandoning you. I'm not abandoning us. I just need to go regulate. But that has helped, because I know some people go, this person's abandoning me. No, I am not abandoning you. I'm going to go regulate. I will be back. And I say, you set your clock. If you say you're coming back in 20 minutes, you come back in
You better
19
come
minutes or
back.
20 minutes, not
Right.
22 minutes.
Right. And
Okay.
I want to say it in more simple terms, which is right now, I want to tell you some really nasty things. I want to tell you that I want to say all kinds of things. So before I get into you're this and you're that, before I get to the point where I'm being abusive to you and saying mean and awful things to you, I'm going to get out of here so that I don't end up making things worse. But the coming back part and the practicing part and having agreements, boundaries are essential. And 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 finding a way to work through conflict, which is what you're doing. Maybe over time, you'll be able to stay in the same room and say, let me take a breath. But right now, you're not ready. And so put in a concrete way of doing this. And I think you look up a timeout for couples and you can find lots of information, because it's something we do when we work in therapy or all the time. But I did want to answer the other, because it's a very different kind of question. Would you read the second half again? Or the last line? So I think it's really important.
He claims I left because he started setting boundaries.
Okay. Uh, it's such a, he claims that I left because well, I don't, is that true for you? Did you leave because he's setting boundaries? I don't, Tammy, there is a really good answer to that. And he's blaming me and trying to find a reason why I left so he can say, you did this because of this. And he's putting it on you, as opposed to I've done all of these things and I completely understand why you don't want to be here right now. He's saying you made me leave and it's your fault I leave. It's so much easier for me to put the blame. If I can blame you for leaving, then I don't, sorry. If I can blame you for leaving, then I don't have to feel bad about how I've hurt you, how I've let you down. It's like, well, they just left me. So,
You abandoned me. Like,
right.
I
And you
can even go to
abandon
that.
me.
You abandoned. I set boundaries and you abandoned me.
Just when I'm trying to do it right, you walk out.
Exactly.
So I really think
Exactly.
it's the type of addict to put the blame on someone else, whatever reason. You didn't leave for that reason, but boy, this person wants you to think that. It is not your fault. If you leave, it is so that you can feel safe for you. It is your boundary, not because, well, anyway, I will leave it there.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, the next one. My spouse lies in his disclosure at a rehab center, telling me the
Ooh,
name of his last affair partner was Emily. When our grandchild was born, that was her name. Is that something
ooh.
the therapist should have said? tell her that is not the name and await formal disclosure. This affected my bonding with the child. I don't know for 4 months that he made up the name. When you were doing disclosures, in private practice, did you have them say the names of affair partners? I mean, like I always go, like I don't need the names of people unless
Oh,
I know those people. Like, because otherwise I hear this all the time where someone gets, like every time I hear the name, you said Emily, so every time I hear the name Emily, all I can think of is his acting out. So, so to me, unless it's somebody that you actually know and are going to find out about, I've had so many partners that go, I found out the name of this person, and now anytime I see that name, it's just really painful for them. And doing disclosures at a rehab center,
thank you.
like
Thank you for saying
like
that.
yeah, that is one of those things that hasn't been done in decades to
Well,
for
some
any,
places,
I guess I was
but
going to say
not in my
I was going to
world.
say for any reputable
Right.
treatment. Like you're not supported with any of that. Like that is, that would be the old fashioned way of like, we're going to give you disclosure, you got no support, good luck. But he can go, whew, and I'm using he and she, I know, but he can go, whew, I got my disclosure done. And like that would not be the most effective and recommended way. But yeah, I go back to the name, like any thoughts on that?
Well, I want to go back to what you said because it's the immediate thing that I thought. Oh, we used to do disclosures in treatment, and they were a disaster. They were an absolute disaster. I remember, and I'll just say it. I remember we had a partner who was they were from Michigan, and she was in Michigan, and he was in treatment in California, and we were doing disclosure. This was like 50, well, oh, more than that, 25 years ago when we stood. And she heard the disclosure on the phone, and she said, "Thank you very much. I'm going to kill myself," and she hung up. And then we had to call the police. The idea that she was ready to hear this, or the couple's in a situation, in the end of treatment, everything is so heightened. So the bottom line is, I would feel very uncomfortable with a treatment center. The goal was we're going to get through the disclosure because that is not the goal of treatment. And by the way, that would make me more likely as an addict to lie, to hold in treatment, to lie, to hold things back. Because if I say this to my therapist, then in a day and a half, I'm going to say it to my spouse. And maybe neither of us are really ready to talk about that. So I'm not a big fan of the rehab. I just don't like that. Um, I don't know. The second part of the question, it's a tough one, Tammy. I believe that I have to tell you everything. And anything that might be meaningful and pertinent to you, I have to get it out. And I have to get it out at the time of disclosure. So I wouldn't want you, let me say this. Is this something the therapist should have said that this is not the name and await formal disclosure? I would wait on a lot of things for formal disclosure. So especially anything that I knew would be devastating to my partner, I would absolutely wait. And besides the fact that your beautiful grandchild was named this, um, it will it has created a circumstance that makes it you very hard to connect to that child in a way that you want to. And my question would be more like, what were you thinking? Or don't you know what that would do with us? Or don't you? Um, but Tammy, again, do you have any? To me, that's just it has to be done in disclosure. That's a huge part of it, and I wouldn't do it outside of disclosure. But that's a
But you
tough
would
one.
do, if you would do names. Like I don't know what you did back in the day.
Well, if you well, what I would do if you said, "Was it my neighbor?" I would
But
say
no,
yes, it
if it was
was, and
somebody
it
you,
was.
yes, yeah. If it was somebody you knew, but if it was some,
That's
I
okay.
don't
So
know.
that's a tricky question. I think in the
Yeah.
context of a larger disclosure,
Hmm.
look, because every time I'm sitting with you and our granddaughter, I'm thinking, wow, she doesn't know that every time I hear that name, I think about so and so. And so I don't know. I think what the spouses would say is, I want to know everything.
I know
And
that. Yeah.
that isn't a like, did you have this kind of sex or what positions? I can't answer that. I think that, yeah,
Okay.
all I can say is I think that anything would be meaningfully and profoundly affect the coupleship needs to come out. And it's going to come out anyway at some point. And there's nothing worse than a spouse finding out something later. So anyway, I don't, that's a really, that, I'd have to know them. I'd have to know the situation. I don't think I could
Yeah.
just call that one out.
And that's fair. As a grandma, I'm
Thank
going to talk
you.
to you. Yeah. So as a grandma, that child has nothing to do with your husband's acting out. And I would invite you to say, like, you know, like transfer that this is an Emily of great joy, and whatever else happened, that nasty little cloud. Here's one more thing. Perhaps I do love EMDR, and on single issues, it can be really helpful. It may be something that getting a session of EMDR, to deal with the trauma of this name, but just if you can just look at that little Emily granddaughter and just gobble her up and go, this person deserves all of my love, untarnished. I wonder if you can reclaim. It wasn't her fault. It's not her name. I mean, even if they had the exact same name, it isn't. This little Emily is your adorable, darling granddaughter. Love her up. So
There's so
okay.
many good questions. I'm kind of looking
I
through the
know.
questions.
Okay, the next one, and I saw this, and I was like, oh, I don't remember saying that the person is angry or hysterical. Regarding the first question, I was wondering why you are assuming the betrayed spouse is hysterical and angry and demanding, rather than the addict being defensive and avoiding. Well, we did find out more to the story, didn't we? Of like, yes, he's being defensive and avoiding. So, but it isn't. And people start going to. We said that they're hysterical and angry. No, they are hurt,
Right.
but having a conversation of any kind of depth, after nine, but rather than it being, I'm not going to answer the phone after 9 o'clock at night. Could it be, let's mutually agree not to call, anytime after, or better yet, have a set time, so this is when we have these phone calls, so, but I'm sorry that you read into something that we said. I have this a lot where I say something and people have turned and hear the really negative about it. This is painful stuff. We want to support everyone in healing and moving forward. So the
You want
next
to
one
ask?
is
Sure.
oh shoot, I got this one. Thank you, Dr. Rob. Exactly what we need: support on how to live like roommates. We understand here the good enough marriage. There you go.
Well, they were different things, right? Different people said different things.
Oh,
Or
okay.
were this the same person who said that? Because I was
I
going to
don't
say,
I don't know. Yeah.
go ahead. I wanted to answer that question. Hold
And
on
I
a
know you
second.
have I just put
We
it
do.
in
We both
answered,
have
and
a
I know you've
boundary,
got a
but
hard stop. Yeah.
that's okay. I'm in the, I want to say something that I want to be completely honest and transparent. 75% of the spouses I work with are absolutely hysterical, devastating, and overwhelmed, and you can see it. They are completely dysregulated. And it is my assumption in general that a spouse is coming at an addict where they absolutely, what they're asking is makes sense, the way they're feeling makes sense, but the way it plays out is not helpful. So it is a bit of my assumption. However, you're right. You could ask me what day it is, and I'm going to say, oh, well, you could ask me to take out the trash. I'm going to say, of course I did, because I don't want to upset you. And then you find out I didn't. So we lie about everything. We lie when we think we're going to disappoint you or to let you down. So you're right. I think there is a piece of the addict, and I don't know where that line is with, it doesn't matter how you're acting. I'm going to lie to you. And to me, that's really good information. Because you can understand that someone might respond to someone who's very angry and very upset with a kind of shutting down and distancing, but not everyone is acting like that. And if you're simply saying, whatever you're saying, and I lie and I distance, then really what is going on with this person I'm involved with, that they can't hear any of this, no matter how clear-headed and in a good place I am. There is one more. Someone said out of the doghouse.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Respectful
breaking a
conflict agreement
boundary.
from out of the doghouse.
Oh,
And yes.
about separation, please listen to that podcast. It's free and it's
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
fantastic. And the idea of being roommates was that
Hmm.
I'd never thought of that.
Hmm.
Roommates don't have sex together. Roommates don't
Hmm.
talk about, it's just such a great line. I'd never thought about it before.
And
So
I
I
put the link in the chat. So
to that
hopefully you clicked on
podcast.
that. So yeah, the podcast and the webinar, there's both. So you've got to go.
TAMI at
Yes.
seekingintegrity.com is how you reach Tammy. She does she does support sessions. She does everything. And she'll direct you anywhere. This is her life's
You've got to
mission.
go. Bye.
Bye.